discussed the so-called pagan elements in the biblical Psalms. By labeling something pagan, it doesn't mean anything. That just means those others than us. That's all pagan is, you know. So the plan was announced and ratified in the Council of the Gods for the flood narrative. Now this is the same thing in the other ancient Near Eastern flood stories that have now been discovered. And so this is very extremely interesting in the Gilgamesh epic and other areas like that. He notes that the prophetic announcement and judgment of the Hebrew prophets, Amos, Ezekiel, and so on, it is according to my intention and desire, is the theme of the God announcing the content of what occurred in the Council of the Gods to the human prophet so that he himself could go warn the people. He's talking about on page 535 here. And he talks about, well, he goes into a lot of details, which I'm going to spare you at the moment. If you can get this article, it's a very good, brand new. It should be relatively easy to gather. There are two forms of the divine name of Elohim in the flood narrative. There is Elohim without the definitive article, and then there is the Ha-Elohim with the definitive article. According to the way Shaviv presents the Hebrew materials, he contends that the additional definite article, which appears in so conspicuous of a place in the flood narrative, incidentally, in a position significant, it is intended to distinguish the different divine beings from each other. So we have the Elohim and we have the Ha-Elohim. Two, at least, different divine beings here, discussed in this polytheistic flood narrative in the Hebrew Bible. It's so fascinating. He says the divine body, this observes and it judges the mortals, because they are the divine council. So this is another aspect of the divine council of the gods theme in the Hebrew Bible. I think it's astonishingly interesting, where the redactors of the narrative, the story in the Bible, they tried hard to conceal the originally destructive role of Yahweh in rewriting this story. And indeed, we can point out a group of gods called the Ha-Elohim. And he says, he brings other parallels of in Exodus, and he brings out parallels elsewhere where we know that Ha-Elohim is in the plural, and they bring their cases before the gods, the Ad Ha-Elohim, so before the gods, I should say, sorry. He whom the gods declare guilty, and the actual declarations are also plural in the Hebrew, showing that the verbs are consistent with the actual plural nouns, the Ha-Elohim, because the verbs are used in plural also. It's interesting that the distinction between the two forms and the respective meanings of Elohim is finally preserved in Exodus 18, verse 19. God, Elohim, be with you. You should represent the people before the gods, the Mul Ha-Elohim, and you should bring their cases before the gods, the Ha-Elohim, and you should bring, and you should bring your cases before the Ha-Elohim. This is the HarperCollins Study Bible. This interprets this interesting use of the Ha-Elohim in two meanings, God and oracle, as an intended pun. Interestingly enough, that's kind of different, isn't it? But even the Bible preserves this difference between Elohim and Ha-Elohim as God, Elohim, and the Ha-Elohim, the gods. Shaviv says this makes beautiful sense in the ancient Near Eastern setting of the Council of the Gods. The flood was discussed, it was judged, mankind was judged, the earth was judged, and the judgment was carried forth because of this. It's very, very interesting how he does this. And here he says on page 538, he's noting several different readings and scholarly analysis of the verse in Exodus. And he says, the Hebrew noun is used with the definitive article, the definite article, and is followed by a verb in the plural rather than in the singular. And this is what I was just saying. And in the covenant code, the Ha Elohim with the definite article refers to unspecified communal deities whose authority in legal matters is recognized. In these two instances, the word Ha Elohim with the definite article designates a specific deity or deities. And he notes that the word Elohim with the definite article may signify, of course not always, but it may signify a certain group or kinds of gods. Both Enoch and Noah were befriended with the gods, generally. And that's in the plural. I think this is fascinating. Hithalek et ha-Elohim. Well, this may have been the traditional formula, you see. Friends of the gods. And only Elohim himself, as the singular God, treated Enoch and Noah personally. But they were friends with the council of the gods. Now, this is big in the book of Enoch also. The books of Enoch, I should say, the plural. So, and he notes on page 539, he says, the general tenor of this entire story is that the council of the gods themselves, the gods in the plural, they were shocked at the corruption of the earth. And Yahweh, in the original story, before it was rewritten and redacted and edited, he decided to destroy the earth. But Elohim befriended Noah, so he went down and warned him, imminent disasters come and get ready. And then, of course, because the divine council of the gods decreed the destruction of earth, it had to occur, because that was the judgment of the council. And so it occurred, but Noah was spared because of God, Elohim. Even though the Ha Elohim, the council of the gods, their decree, their judgment, and the action of the flood was carried out. So it was fulfilled also. Isn't that fascinating? The more scholars look into the Hebrew Bible, the more plausible it is that humans, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Adam, as he was originally created, etc., all were friends with the council of the gods. Isaiah, the prophets, Amos, Ezekiel, the psalmist in 82. Many, many places. Micaiah in 1 Kings, I believe, chapter 22. Many places in the Hebrew Bible discuss this council of the gods. And now we may plausibly add, with Shaviv, that even the flood narrative is based upon the decision of the council of the gods. This theme is growing. This theme is expanding and getting very large, and it is becoming more all-inclusive within the structural narrative of the Hebrew Bible, as Shaviv is showing with just the flood narrative. This has been shown with numerous different aspects, whether it's in the poetry, whether it's in the prose, whether it's in the narratives, whether it's in the histories, whether it's in the prophecies. This council of the gods theme is becoming the dominant background to all of the sacred literatures of the Near East, especially our Bible. That's utterly fascinating, because this is one aspect of the restoration Joseph Smith got right. He proposed this council of the gods in the book of Abraham. He proposed this. He knew whereof he spoke. Now the scholarship is finally beginning to catch up with the prophet Joseph Smith.